Elizabeth, I'm super excited to chat with you today. Thanks for being here. I am constantly amazed by people that navigate life and motherhood on a solo basis. But even if we don't have like a committed partner or committed relationship, the fact is we're all connected to different people, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm sure as a marriage and family therapist, you see this in so many different aspects, whether it's using the things you teach to in-laws or partners or co-parenting, all of those things. So I'm super excited to unpack that today. And really, I want to just kind of start there for someone that's maybe like, oh, I don't need to talk to a licensed family and marriage therapist. I think it's really important to kind of unpack like all the different things that these conversations can support with and the different dynamics in households. And also, I like to come to it from a point of like, offense instead of defense, I guess is the way to think about it. Like, how do we get in front of things before they become a problem? So, for someone that's like not used to therapy or working through something before then, what would you tell that person before we dive into the deep stuff?
Yeah, what would I tell them about maybe trying to get comfortable about reasons to go to therapy or how it will help them?
Yeah, or to have like more in depth conversations with your partner to just
Oh,
like
yeah.
want to work on things before they become a problem.
It's really interesting that you asked this because I was just talking to someone else about the same exact question, which is, you know, what is it that happens first before people go to therapy? How can they start
Yeah.
navigating the issues together? And I think that something that's really challenging is that when there's issues in a relationship, we tend to start to feel anxiety. When people feel anxiety, they do one of two things. They either become really activated, and so they become overbearing, essentially, which means that they want to talk about it all the time. And so they're constantly pressing their partner to talk about things, and they might do it at the wrong moment, sending a
Yeah.
text in the middle of a work meeting or saying, "Hey, it's 10 p.m. Why don't you want to talk to me? I know that we're tired, but we've got to talk right now."
Guilty.
The other, yeah, me too. That's me. I'm the activated one. I'm the one sending the text to my husband who's like doing work in the basement. Hey, can you come up and can we talk? Um, but and then the other thing that happens when we're anxious and upset about being disconnected or arguing is we withdraw. So that person is doing the opposite of what I just described, which is they're doing
Mm.
anything they can not to talk about it. They're taking on extra projects at work and staying later. They are ignoring text messages. They're giving brief responses. They're saying, "Oh my God, why do we have to talk about this again?" And so, one of the things that I tell people is when you want to start connecting again and figuring out how to improve your relationship, like before therapy even becomes a thing, is you've got to get a handle on your own stress and anxiety. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be creating patterns with the other person that are not helpful and that are all about your anxiety running the show instead of you being from a grounded place trying to communicate what's important.
That's so good. The other thing is anxiety's kind of become, I don't want to call it a buzzword, but in some ways it's a good thing, right? We're talking about it, people are getting support, but I see in motherhood a lot that there is confusion around anxiety because we as moms are in charge of little humans. We have a lot of moving parts going on. And so we're going to naturally have some fears, some concerns, things that we have to figure out. Now, if someone's trying to figure out, am I in a place of anxiety and I need to work on these different things, or I'm just navigating life and it's coming with these different things, how do you kind of know? Are there a couple different red flags that we can think about? Or does part of me wants to say it doesn't really matter because we want to do the work before it comes in, right? What would you say from like the professional standpoint?
Yeah. So when I talk about anxiety, we all have some form of anxiety. There's diagnosable disordered anxiety, right? And that is like something that you might need to get treatment for or medication for or whatever it is. But when we are worried about something or concerned about something, we have a stress response. And so whether it's
Yeah.
taking care of our little kids and feeling like, wow, I'm like very overwhelmed by this. My body is feeling anxiety. I'm actually having those stress chemicals racing through me. And so I'm having to think a lot, or I can't relax, or I'm struggling to sleep, or I feel shaky. I feel shut down, any of those types of things. That's a stress response, that's anxiety. And so every day of our lives, I think as parents, we're going to feel some of it, and that's just normal life. In fact, if you don't have stress and anxiety in your life, you actually wouldn't be a functioning human being. You do
Mm.
need that. The positive stress we have is actually called eustress. So it's spelled EUSTRESS. And that's the stress that motivates us to get things done, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
I'm worried that I am going to forget my kid's doctor's appointment. That's actually a good thing because then it makes me put it in my calendar, right? I'm concerned about whether or not my kid's going to hit their head when they're on a bike. I actually care if they hurt themselves. So that's a good thing because it's going to get me to put the helmet on them. I'm worried I'm going to get divorced because my husband and I haven't talked in an entire week, and that's not a good thing. So now I'm going to be motivated to do something about it. So when you're still in that stress stage where your stress and anxiety is motivating you to do effective things, that's a good thing. You need it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd stay in bed all day. The problem is when it becomes such an activation that you begin to be run by a motor with your anxiety, or it's the complete opposite where it's almost like you've gassed out. And so you are completely withdrawn in those scenarios.
Mm.
So as a parent, what that might look like is I'm so anxious that my kid's going to get hurt. So I can't even let them ride their bike down the hill. I'm just saying, like, my son's name is George. And so when I'm in that place, I'm like, George, George, stop. Oh my God. Da, 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 da. And because I can't even allow him to take risks, it's impacting him. Or I'm thinking back to postpartum. I'm so anxious. I'm not sleeping at night because I'm just staring at this baby, making sure that they're okay. So this has moved from it being productive stress and anxiety
Yeah.
to it taking over my life. And again, the opposite is being withdrawn. You're so anxious about what's happening that you're just not engaged at all. And so you're saying, I don't even know how to talk to my partner about our problems. So I'm just not even going to bring it up. Or I don't even know how to mother. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to be super busy and like clean the kitchen all day. And then, at the end of the day, put them to bed and not engage because I'm so anxious about what I'm doing as a parent. So does that make sense?
Definitely. And I think really the point that I've heard also in specifically like postpartum depression and
Yeah.
anxiety specifically, and what I'm hearing with what you're saying too is you may have these feelings and that may be okay. But when it stops you from doing something that you do want to do or need to do, like sleep or enjoying bike riding with your child or different things like that, that's when we want to look up and go, hey, I'm not able to do these things, so I want to look at it different. But you might be scared. You might be like, oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't crash on his bike.
Of
But
course.
if you're letting him ride the bike and you're getting through to it, that's kind
Yeah.
of the normal fear, right?
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
how does that show up with our partner? Putting that into different scenarios, right? Is I see a lot of posts in mom groups. I think relationship posts and
Home
mom
groups.
groups are probably the top thing that I see coming through on Facebook groups and different things coming in. And a lot of times it can be my partner's on his phone doing this, I'm nervous. My partner's doing this and I'm nervous. My partner's this and I'm scared. Where's kind of some healthy boundaries around privacy and conversation and prompting things and having this like fear inside of you? I know that there's like probably so many layers to unpack in this and it's super
Yeah.
situational, but if you could give us like a couple thoughts for someone that's maybe like, okay, but I have some of that fear and anxiety with my partner, what are some ways that you can kind of know when it's something to work on and something to just kind of be like, okay, this is life?
Yeah. So that it's hard because, like you said, there's a lot of layers. And as a therapist, there'd be so many things I want to ask, right?
Yeah.
Like, if this was somebody coming in saying they have a history of affairs and now I'm seeing them on their phone all the time and I'm really anxious, my answer to that would probably be like, well, let's talk about what signals is your body actually sensing that feels familiar, right? And
Yeah.
what do you do with that? So last time they had an affair, they started to pull away. And when you would come in the room, they'd put their phone down, and your body is sensing all of this as a signal that something might be wrong. Now,
Mm.
let's say that this is somebody, their partner has never betrayed them, their partner has always been honest, there's no history of that, but yet they might have a history in their own life. Maybe they had a parent who was not honest, or they had another partner who wasn't honest. Something that would be really important there is reality checking. Yes, let's notice what your body is feeling, and also what is the reality of your partner? Like, talk to me about, have there been other situations where they've lied? Do they tend to be honest? What do you know about them as a person? And can we put those things together where it's that you know that they're honest, there haven't been any signals that they're lying, and at the same time your body is feeling signals that you're used to from the past. So what do you do with those two things? Now, regardless, what we often do is that we don't address these things head on from a grounded place, right? So
Hmm.
we start to feel nervous and we spin out. And so instead of just going to the person and saying, hey, I've noticed you've been on your phone a lot, I am feeling really concerned about that. It makes me think that I'm nuts, or it makes me think that, I'm looking into it too much, but I do feel anxious. And so I'm curious, like, what is going on with your phone? Being able to address it directly. What I see people often do is they're not addressing it directly. So they're either going to Facebook groups and telling a whole
Yeah.
group of strangers about their personal issues, or they are addressing it with passive aggression. So it might be something like, "Oh, you're on your phone again. What's on there?" Or what girl are you liking on Instagram today? Or da 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 da. So it's very passive aggressive, or they completely push it down and they say nothing because they convince themselves this is stupid. Like, I shouldn't say anything. I'll sound needy. I'll sound like I'm dramatic, whatever it is. But in a secure relationship, we can just address things head on, even if they
Yeah.
sound crazy, or even if you feel like you're looking into it too much, or you think your partner's going to lie to you anyway. Nobody in the Facebook mom group is going to be able to tell you what your partner is doing. In fact,
Yep.
the advice in those groups is often fairly terrible. I work with a lot of people who have had a lot of damage done to their relationships, because the problem with those groups is that you've got a whole bunch of people who are projecting their own experience onto you. And so they will come with very strong feelings. It might be your anxiety is ridiculous. You're just being dramatic. You're trying to control your partner. You need to get that under wraps. Or the other side, well, obviously your partner is violating your boundaries, da 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 da, da, and they're an asshole and you should divorce them. And these are very extreme responses based on their own projections. And so
Yeah.
it can feel supportive, and in the moment it can reduce your anxiety because you're getting feedback, but you need to be getting that feedback directly from your partner. Now, the hardest part is that when they give you an answer, you have to decide what to do with that. And if you're still getting spidey senses, then that's really challenging. You have to decide, what am I going to do with these? Am I going to say, I don't believe you and I need proof, and here are some things you could do to help me feel more comfortable? Or are you going to say, okay, that sounds like a pretty good answer, and continue to kind of monitor the situation? In either
Yeah.
direction, nobody's going to be able to soothe your anxiety except for you. And that is really, really challenging to navigate.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so good. And the last thing you said of like, what do you want to do with it? And do you want to monitor the situation? It reminded me that in so many situations, the person that we're, feeling these feelings from or towards, they might not be aware at all how you're feeling or how
Yeah.
they're coming across. Like they literally might just have been on a TikTok binge for the last week of a certain person and you're thinking these certain things about it, right? But if you don't
Yeah.
communicate and then they're not like, oh wow, you know what, I have been on my phone a lot lately, or I'm doing these certain things, then they're not aware. And again, there's other layers and situations for maybe you might have a different dynamic going on, but if you don't, which I actually think that the majority of the time we have like good situations going on. And
Yes.
then to your point,
Majority.
where yeah, majority is there's not horrible things happening behind the scenes. But
Right.
Facebook groups can make us feel otherwise. And I have definitely seen those posts too, where someone's sharing something and all of a sudden everyone's baggage is being put on you. And it's okay to get that initial support in some ways, but then also we don't have that real support to move forward. Now, on the theme of Facebook groups, I want to give you a very specific example in a local group that I'm a part of that came up yesterday.
Okay.
And I want the marriage and family therapist response to this because there were so many different comments, and I was like, what would a professional say in this scenario? And
Yeah.
so, in this scenario specifically, a mom felt that her teen daughter was victimizing her, that she was coming up with these things that were happening that weren't real. And she was like, Mom, you're yelling at me. Stop yelling at me. Mom, you treat this kid differently when you're around these people. You're doing this and you're acting a certain way. And so this teen daughter from the post, again, I'm just taking the context of the post, but from the
Right.
post, she felt that her teen daughter was making these stories up. And she's like, that's just not what's happening. That's not what's happening. What do I do? My daughter's just victimizing me and making things up and lying. Now, the comments that were provided ranged from teen daughters are horrible. Yes, welcome to this. That's all of these things. Your daughter's gaslighting you. You need to put a stop to this. Record and video her. All of these things.
So
I'm really
let's just
curious.
escalate the situation.
Escalate all the situations. And I will tell you, I had like pretty difficult teen years. And
Oh, me
I
too.
just reading that was like, I feel like I was this daughter in many ways. And my opinion, a total unprofessional opinion, reading this was like, I bet she has no idea she's doing this, but this is about something else that she's feeling.
Yeah.
And I want this mom to figure out why is my daughter responding this way? Why am I feeling this way? Like,
Yeah.
why is she doing this? So I'm curious, what would the professional guide this mom to do in this
Agree
situation?
with you. I mean, a few things. To me, this situation is screaming a mom who has no boundaries. If the mom was listening right now, I would gently say to her, please remove the post. Your name is associated with that, and your daughter did not give you permission to share on a public platform what she's
Yeah.
struggling with as a hormonal teenager. And now what you've done is you've gotten a whole bunch of people to gang up on your child. And I would ask this mother to step back and think, is any of this dynamic what's happening in the home where you are not seeing your child? You are seeing your own anxiety and your own frustration, and you are making that the forefront. And you're a human being. You are, of course, allowed to have feelings and concerns and frustrations. They should be talked about in private to respect your child's privacy. And my guess is that some of these behaviors are actually in the home too, where
Mm.
there's a lot of self focus. You're not being fair to me. You're lying about me. You're not doing da 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 da. And what's happening is then you're blurring what is needed for relational work. Relationships require your ability to see the other person and to also see yourself. And with this whole scenario, you blasting your daughter online, you're only seeing yourself. You're not seeing her. You're not seeing what's happening for her. Your daughter in the teen years, what we know about brain science is that teenagers become what's called myopic. They have very black and white thinking, and they feel as if other people do not understand them. This is consistent across all teenagers. Now, when we're adults, we have what's called nuanced thinking. And so the feedback you're getting is coming from a nuanced brain. When you're getting it from other people, where it's like, oh, but we know that you weren't yelling because yelling is this many decibels and da 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 da. But your child is in a black and white myopic state, and they actually don't have the capacity you have to be relational. So all they can see is themselves. Now, as an adult, your job is to be able to see both. And so with your child, I'm curious if you've been able to say to yourself, you know what, I'm really overwhelmed by this. I'm going to deal with this with a close friend who will keep my daughter's information private, or a therapist, or my partner, whoever it is. I will deal with my feelings with another adult, but I'm going to go to my daughter and I'm going to say, hey, I'm really confused. I love you so much. And when we talk, I've noticed that you often hear me differently than the way I think I sound. What are you noticing? By being curious with your child, I think sometimes adults think, well, I'm just going to be validating it. You're not validating it. You're letting your child explain to you. And if your child is just coming up with those as emotional responses, because what I can tell you, you might be right. You might not be screaming at your child. They might be
Yeah.
having a very emotional response to you. And so what they're going to say is something just to tick you off. Stop yelling at me. I mean, we've all been there. And the other person's like, I'm not yelling at you, right? But
Yeah.
maybe at that point when you say, hey, look, I really don't think I'm yelling. What is it that you don't like? Well, your voice isn't raised, but the way you talk to me, it insinuates that you're looking down on me. I don't want to look down on you. I'm just trying to tell you what my concerns are. Give me an example. When did I look down on you? Really try to be curious. After curiosity, boundaries. You are the adult. You can have boundaries with your child, and you don't need to get so flustered about what they're accusing you of. You're yelling at me instead of saying, I'm not yelling at you. How dare you gaslight me? Da 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 da. Which, by the way, gaslighting is way overused right now. Instead of saying that, say to your child, whoa, I was not yelling. I love you. I'm not going to have this conversation with you, though, if you are going to keep saying these things. When you are in a place where we can talk, I'll come back and talk to you. Right. So if curiosity doesn't work and the child, I'm going to tell people that you, I'm going to call the police on you, whatever they say. Whoa, that is too far. I have limits. I love you. I'm going to leave the room. But again, you're staying calm. You're not getting flustered by your child. You're an adult. You know how to hold on to yourself. If
Yeah.
those two things don't work and you genuinely think that your child is making things up that are not true, are you concerned about their mental health? Because if you're saying, I really think that they're insane and they're having delusions and none of this is true, then and the curiosity and the boundaries don't work, then my third question is, why are you not getting them treatment? But my guess is that you're not actually concerned about them being delusional. You're
Yeah.
just frustrated that you're not able to have a conversation with them. And so if you're really concerned, then they should be getting mental health care. But if it's more, I'm annoyed and I'm in a power struggle, then stop the power struggle, be curious and have limits. And you get to then reclaim your space as an adult and you're not going back to being a teenager with them.
Ooh, that is so good. So many good things. Now I can feel some triggered moms like on the other side of this, right? And this is
Yeah.
what happens when we take responsibility and we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
So, of course, doing the work, going to therapy, working through your own past and the things that you have to do, that's all really important. But talk a little bit to like from a psychological professional level why that's so important, like why you need to work through your own stuff first so that you can listen to someone tell you how to parent better and make a better family dynamic without throwing up walls or reasons that that wouldn't work for you.
Yeah. So we all as human beings, we only know how to be based off of what's been modeled to us. And a lot of these things, they're not even verbally modeled to us. We're just used to it. So if I was working with this mom, I would certainly be so empathetic. And by the way, let me throw myself under a bus. My kid was being disrupted the other day and I literally said, shut up to a 6-year-old. And so I need to figure out, right,
Life.
what was triggered in me, what is
Yeah.
going on. But if I wasn't self-aware, I would be blaming the 6-year-old, right? I would be
Yeah.
saying, this is because you're so out of control and I wouldn't have to say shut up to you if you didn't da, 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 da. But luckily, because I take time to figure out where's this coming from, I could step back and apologize to my kid and I could say, okay, what is that all about and where does that come from? And so when we're really reflecting on ourselves, it doesn't just open up the door for a better relationship with another person, it helps us to have empathy for ourselves, because instead
Yeah.
of getting really mad at myself for the shut up comment, I was like, oh, you know what, my life growing up was so strict. I wasn't able to really be loud and playful. Nobody said shut up to me for sure, but that's because I didn't make any noise. And so when my kid is being really disruptive and I'm stressed out, it feels overstimulating to me because I was never allowed to do that. Right. And so because I have that awareness, I can fix it, but I can also be kind to myself. And I think that when people are working on themselves, yes, it's for maybe other people, but it's also so that you don't have to shame spiral, so that somebody can give you feedback and say, what's going on? Like, where did that come from for you? And you as a parent can say, oh, you know what? That when I was a teenage girl, nobody would listen to me.
Yeah.
And so I feel like now I've got this, it's called destructive entitlement. We gain destructive entitlement when something didn't happen for us. We think that other people were entitled to watch other people go through the same thing. And so we can have empathy and say, now I understand. I want my daughter to stop it because nobody let me do it. And so I don't feel comfortable letting anybody else do it. And what was that like for me? And so it allows you to feel better inside, and it allows you to feel more grounded inside. And then ultimately, it will help those relationships with your family members. But the best part of it, the most important part of it for you, is that it helps you.
Yeah. And a big part of what I'm hearing too is this can help release mom guilt, right? Because in a
Yes.
situation like that, and that's what you're saying, but putting like more of that buzzword on it, is you could do something wrong, quote unquote wrong, something that you're not proud of,
Yeah.
and then sit in all this guilt and be like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how did I do that? Where when you have this skill set and this awareness, you don't have to go down that spiral either. You can pause and say, okay, where did that come from? Exactly like you're saying. And how am I going to navigate this? Okay, I absolutely love that. You have a couple different, I don't know, themes or ways that the research backs how you explain different things in different
Yeah.
areas of our life. And one of which is the four horsemen and the four communication habits. Now, talk to me about these communication habits. And does this specifically apply to our partners, or also the same thing we're talking about with our kids and ourselves and how we communicate to all these different people we're connected to?
Yeah, so since the 70s, Dr. John Gottman has been doing a lot of research on couples. And, so far as putting them in apartments and kind of analyzing their every move with each other. So thousands of couples. And what he found is that there are two categories of couples. There are what he calls the masters of relationships and what he calls the disasters of relationships. And the disasters can become masters. So that's the good news. But what he found is that the people who report that they're unfulfilled, that they are unhappy in their relationships, that they're fighting, that they're breaking up, that there are four things that they communication habits that they use in conflict that do not help them. And he dubbed them the four horsemen because, like the four horsemen in the Bible, they signal the end of
Yeah.
times. So we don't want them to be showing up in our relationship chronically. Something that I
Yeah.
think is really important, though, is to remember that we all do these things. So as I'm listing them right now, the caveat I want to give you is if you've done them, you are normal. It's okay. But that you don't want them to be your chronic way of being. And if you do them, it's really important that you own it and then take accountability for that and shift it. And so those are the things that need to happen. That's it in order to kind of salvage your communication. So the first of the four horsemen is criticism. Criticism is when we have a problem, but we connect it with a character flaw in our partner. So I'm trying to think of one that we have in my house. We like never pick up after ourselves in my house. It's just like constant picking up after each other all the time, right? And so the problem is that we just have every day just stuff everywhere.
Mm.
Um, and if I was to be critical of my husband or my son, I would say something like, "You're always so lazy," or "You never pick up after yourself," or "You always step over things," or "You never want to help." Any of those always and never is a pretty good sign you're being critical. If instead I was going to do what he calls the antidote, if I was going to just talk for myself and what I need, then what I would talk about is the actual problem. Hey, we have stuff scattered all over this house. You can still be mad. You don't have to be this like
Yeah.
Zen mama all the time. We have stuff all over the house. It is a mess. I feel exasperated, exhausted, and overwhelmed and pissed off by all the stuff in the house. I really need us to come up with a plan for fixing it, right? So you can still have frustration or anger, energy behind what you're saying, but to avoid the criticism that cause a relationship to deconstruct, you have to talk about what you're noticing, what you feel, and then be very clear about what you need. I need everyone in this house to start picking up after themselves. That is just what I need. What is the plan? Do we have to do it every day at noon? We go around and we just pick things up quickly. So that's criticism. The second is defensiveness. Defensiveness is when we don't take responsibility for our part. Going back to that mom, I think she was coming from a really defensive place, right? This is all
Mhm.
my child. They're a Looney Tune, and I don't know what's going on with them. And so, with our partners and our kids, we can become really defensive. If somebody brings up that they're struggling with something and we feel like some mom Mom guilt really can elicit defensiveness, right? We
Yeah.
feel like, oh, you're telling me I've been a bad mom. Um, so I want to defend myself because as parents, we work so hard.
Yeah.
This mom in that Facebook group probably works so hard every day. You're trying to make good choices. You are spending money. You are working. You are giving energy. You are not sleeping until 3 a.m. And then you have this little brat come to you and say, you always yell at me, or you never buy me the things the other kids have, or our house isn't as nice as the other people's houses, or whatever it is. It's so easy to be like, are you kidding me? Do you know how much I do for you? How am I supposed to? Your friend's mom makes dinner because your friend's mom doesn't work, but I don't get home until 7 p.m. and that's why I can't make you dinner. Whatever it is. So
Yeah.
defensiveness is when we explain ourselves or justify what the other person's complaint has been.
Mm.
Um, in a relationship, it would look like if I went to my husband and said, there's stuff everywhere, we need to pick it up. And he said, well, when do you think I have time to pick it up? Da, 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 da. When we get into that, we're just going to go back and forth. So the antidote, the thing that you want to, if you catch yourself being defensive, instead, it's just taking responsibility for your part. And if you truly have no part, it's validating anything that makes sense. It's not validating things that don't make sense. So I'm using this example again, but the mom in that group does not have to say to her daughter, it makes sense that you think I'm yelling.
Yeah.
It does, she doesn't have to say that. If she really doesn't think she was yelling, do not validate that. But what makes sense? Maybe your daughter is saying, you just don't understand me, da 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 da. Well, you don't, right? You're asking for advice on a group because you don't understand her. If I was in your position, honey, I would probably feel the same. It makes sense you think I don't understand you because right now I don't think I do, right? Right now
Yeah.
we're not on the same page. So anything that you can grasp onto that makes sense. With my husband, we don't ever pick anything up around here. I'm so exhausted. I need help. Defensiveness would be, I'm too busy. Just validating would be, I can see it. There is stuff everywhere. You're right. That's it. He's not
Yeah.
saying he's at fault, none of that. Um, if you are responsible for something, just own it. You're right. I leave my crap everywhere all day. We do need to figure out a solution. Or if you're that mom, you're right. I get mad and I do yell sometimes. I don't know what to do about it. I'm really frustrated, but you're right. I yelled. So that's all you have to do. Put a period on it. The next two are stonewalling and contempt. So these are kind of like escalated versions of the others. So stonewalling is a very defensive position where you're just not responding anymore. And this happens because people get so flooded that we talked about it earlier, they completely withdraw. It's like they can't figure out what to say or how to say it, so they just shut down. And then the other is contempt, which is the very activated version of criticism. And it's not just attacking the character, it's doing it from a one up position. So I'm no longer saying, you guys never help me. I'm saying, you are pathetic. My family is pathetic. If you weren't so lazy and just sitting on your video game all day, you would look around this house and you would see that there's a problem. When we have contempt, we start to sneer, we're sarcastic, we roll our eyes. And the antidote to those two things is number one, self-soothing. So being able to notice I'm out of control in my body right now. That's why I'm shut down, or that's why I'm saying these really mean things. I need to take a break and calm down. And the other antidote to contempt is really talking about your feelings instead. Unfortunately, moms can get contemptuous and it can be painted in an unfair light as like the mean, nagging mom. The reason that some people show contempt, though, and there's a lot of reasons, but some people show contempt because they have a history of their needs not being met. And they are
Mm.
just so over it and so tired of it. And they feel like the only thing that maybe will get somebody's attention is if they one up the intensity of what they're saying. And so we can have a lot of compassion for that. But what's going to happen with your contempt is it's going to degrade the relationships. So your kids are going to say, I don't want to be near you anymore. And your partner is going to say, whoa, where did that come from? That's way too cutting. So instead, talking about the feeling, I am exhausted. I am so tired of this. I am really sad. I'm anxious. I am overwhelmed. Why do none of you see that? Is very different than you all are pathetic or you all are
Yeah.
ridiculous. So that's a long-winded explanation of the four horsemen.
Oh my gosh, but I think it's so helpful. And I can see myself, family members, friends, people in our community in so many different of these areas where we do just kind of do it naturally. It's kind of a way of life. And so being aware and making a big theme of what I'm hearing for everything you're saying is making it about you rather than making it about someone else.
Yeah.
And doing that in a healthy way. I really liked how you brought up the specifics of you don't have to say, you're right, I'm not cleaning up or all these things. You can say, I see that, you know and it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you have to solve every problem or put yourself down in the response, but it's acknowledging, yes, that's how that other person feels and I can see that this is what makes sense, and working through that. Now I do think that you have to know what you want to be able to communicate what you want, and to be
Yeah.
able to have a good family, a good relationship, a good self identity and worth. And I notice that often we go through all the motions of life, whether it's going to high school and college or jumping into your career path, stepping into motherhood, and you're checking box after box after box. And that's a little bit of my story too, till I woke up one day. And so for someone that hasn't had that moment to really sit back and reflect and say, what type
Yeah.
of relationship do I want? What type of family do I want? Do I care if my family picks up after themselves? What do I want my house to feel like? What are
Yeah.
some of the first steps that you see from a professional standpoint to get aware with what you even want?
Oh, it is so hard. I empathize so deeply with the parents. So most of the couples I work with are parents, and they're parents in this phase, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, now we've been parenting for 5 years or 4 years or whatever. And like, who am I? And is there anything left of me between like parenting and school with the kids and work? And like, I just am going through the motions. And one of the things that I think helps is number one, just to within your relationship, have regular check ins about that. Like, how are you feeling about who you are? Like, and how much time you're getting? Like, how are you feeling about where your energy is being placed? All of those types of things. Actually ask each other these questions because it often takes conversation to even notice these things. I think that when we're insular, we're just going through the motions. But if my husband came to me and said, how are you feeling about the way like your time is used and your identity right now and who you are? That gives me this opportunity to actually talk about it. Now, if you don't have somebody to ask you that, journal about it. What is going on in my life and how am I feeling about it? The second part that can be really challenging is figuring out what the heck to do about it. So you might identify, oh my gosh, I have no time for me. I was telling you before we got on that I have a 6-month-old baby. And so, as you're well aware, because you have kids too, that's usually the period where like there just really isn't any time for you, especially if you've
Yeah.
got other kids, running one to school. I get home from the drop off, I'm taking care of the kid, I'm doing work, and then the baby all night and dinner and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Just goes on and on and on. So, like, what do I even do about it? And when you're thinking about what to do about it, I like to think about like multiple options that you have. One is that you just honor that it exists right now and that it's a phase and you don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. Um, I think sometimes the world and what we see can make us put pressure. Why is my friend Brittany just had a baby and she's already going to the gym every day? Like I see
Yeah.
these pictures and I haven't found time for that. I don't know where it's coming from. But instead of that comparison, one of your choices is to say, this is just my life right now. Like, I don't have time for anything else. And
Yeah.
it's hard, and I can grieve that and I can sit with it, but I can be really kind to myself and say, there's nothing I can change right now. I'm just going to sit with this. Maybe that's your choice. The other is to say, I can't sit with this. This is not okay for me. I want to be like Brittany and go to the gym every day or 3 days a week or whatever it is. And so something needs to change. And so you have to identify then something needs to change. The third option that you have is to say, I am going to start sacrificing and quitting things in order for something to change. And so this is like a much more abrasive response. And I'll give you a little example of what that looked like in real life for me. During the pandemic, my husband and I asked each other this question, like, how are you feeling about the way life looks right now? And my husband was in a very corporate job. It was like until 7 p.m. every day, stuck in the basement because nobody was going to the off could go to the office anymore.
Yeah.
And we had a little child. He never saw him, but he heard us upstairs dealing with things. And I was miserable because I'm working and dealing with kids and da 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 da. So if we went through these three options, option one would have been just to say, this is our lot in life. Like, we have to stick with this right now. There's no other options. How can we manage stress? How can we connect with each other? How can we figure this out? Option
Yeah.
two might have been something like a little less abrasive, but some change. Why don't you start putting the boundary in that you have to leave work at 5? Or maybe at least one day a week we'll do family dinner so we're all sitting together, and that'll be helpful. Maybe we get a nanny so the nanny can help us while we're both working. And that was the option we first tried. We're not happy. We don't have time for ourselves, our identity, who we are. So we got a nanny. We're going to work these same jobs, but at least we'll have some help. Well, guess what? That didn't make us have any more time because if anybody works from home, we heard everything the entire time downstairs
Yep.
and constantly had the knock. I'm sorry, I can't find the peanut butter. Can you help me or whatever it is? And
Yep.
so we eventually said, no, we have to do something abrasive to change because we're really unhappy. My husband's a musician. He had no space for his identity. And I really enjoy my work, and I was having to like cancel appointments and all sorts of stuff. So he quit his job. So that was the very abrasive thing that we had to do. And in fact, we had to sacrifice money, make way less money doing that, obviously. We had to make big changes to who is what and where. And my husband's identity, while he's gotten to do more music, his identity as like a provider has changed, which we've had to
Yeah.
grapple with. And so, anyway, yeah, you have like these three choices when you notice that you're not happy with the way life is going for you.
I love that. And that's such a good tangible example, like in your job specifically and how that works in the house. Um, when you're talking about the first two examples specifically, and it's kind of looking at what you want in life and what your current life is, and kind of accepting the reality of the
Yeah.
season, I had this thought of just like my gut is to be like, but here's all the positives, right? Like, you can't go to the gym right now, but you're getting these baby cuddles and you're getting this, and you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I know how unhelpful that can be to certain people in certain seasons. And so I would love to get like a professional take on that to say, like, okay, what is the balance between honoring, like, we're just going to go with status quo right now, even if it doesn't feel good, and saying, okay, I want to make a change. And then I feel like the third option in my response, but I get what you're saying is different for the action you take, is like, but I should be grateful. I want to have this gratitude. I need to find the beauty in here. How would you balance that, like finding the beauty, that positivity, looking towards that with also honoring like when things don't feel good?
That's such a good question. And first of all, I think like your go-to response isn't completely problematic, right? Like I think that right now it could be like called toxic positivity or something like
Yeah.
that. Um, but I think if we were to go deeper with where that first response came from, it's connected to some values that you have. And so I think what you're trying to bring up in that moment is like, using my silly example, like as my friend, you would maybe be trying to point out to me, but Liz, like maybe you value something different. Like maybe Brittany really values her alone time. I'm making up this Brittany character. I don't even know who Brittany is,
Yeah.
by the way.
I think it's a great example though, because people do step into motherhood and have different priorities. And one could
Yeah,
be going to
and
the gym.
that's
I have a friend that I like fits that perfect identity. She's like,
yeah,
I'm going to do this version of motherhood so I can go to the gym every day at this time. That is not a value or priority of mine. So that would be, maybe it should be on a
exactly.
health level, but it's not. So I think that's a great point.
Right. So what you were you were relating with maybe my values. You were saying, but
Yeah.
like you're Liz right now, you're valuing baby cuddles and you're valuing like maybe quiet time on the couch and maybe you're valuing nap, like you personally taking a nap. Like maybe
Yeah.
that's what you're valuing right now. And so that to be like, but you've got the cuddles and the naps and da 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 da. And so the same with the other mom, she might be having a conversation that mirrors this, saying, I don't know if I spend enough time with my kids. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm going to the gym. Am I selfish? Da 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 da. So if you're having these kind of like identity crises of like, who am I supposed to be and what am I supposed to look like and what's motherhood supposed to be for me? The first thing I think that Kelsey was getting at is, well, are your value, are some of this because you are aligning actually with values, even though it's not ideal. So while you might really miss going out to dinner with your friends all the time, maybe the reason you're not making time for that right now is because actually what you're valuing is quiet time, cuddles, you know, making dinners instead. And while the day to day, it feels like a grind and it actually doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like it fits in with your ideal for life. Sometimes when you sit back, you actually find the reason you're in the predicament is because you do truly value it. And that just
Mhm.
because we value something doesn't mean it feels great all the time. So that's the first piece. Look at what you value here, and you can have some gratitude for that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you know what? It does kind of suck being stuck inside all day, but I do actually really value this. I always wanted to be this way as a mother. And so I'm grateful that I get this opportunity to do it. Maybe that's what that looks like. For the parts where you have no choice. So let's say that you're a parent who doesn't particularly value all the baby cuddles and you want the gym, but maybe financially right now you can't, or maybe you don't have enough
Mhm.
help because you're a single parent and you just literally cannot do it. I think that's when the positivity can feel really crappy, where, you might have somebody saying to you, but like you have these beautiful kids. Like, who cares if you can go to the gym? And you're thinking in the back of your head, but I have no choice. Like, if I was
Yeah.
choosing not to go, then fine, but I have no help. I have no money. I have no choice to do this. And that I think is the part where it's okay for you as a person to sit with, I'm grieving right now who I don't get to be. And I'm allowed to grieve that. I'm allowed to feel like this is a loss for me and feel sad about it and frustrated about it and whatever it is. Um, and maybe I don't have to do anything, or maybe I can't do anything about it other than every once in a while when it hits me, say, whew, yeah, I'm grieving that version of myself that used to go, I'm using the gym example, to the gym every day, where I'm grieving that part of myself that always thought I was going to be a stay at home mom, but now I'm working 60 hours a week. And there's not a lot I can do right now because I need that paycheck, but I am grieving it. And actually, just like putting your hand on your heart and letting yourself feel sad about that and letting yourself recognize it's not a personal failing. There's just nothing you can do about it right now.
Yeah. Okay, that makes so much sense. And I can see in the friend seat, if you're having that conversation, I feel like the right thing to do that friend. The first offer is, can I help you? Can I watch your friend? Can I watch your
Yeah,
kids so you can go to the gym and you can go do these things? But then secondary would be, yeah, for lack of a better word, that sucks. Like, and I'm
that
sorry.
sucks.
I'm sorry you don't have that, right? Is there anything else that as the supportive person you see would be helpful in most of those situations and using that as an example?
I think, other than offering the support, if you can offer support, and that might look different. It might be like, I can't watch the kids because I live 80 miles away, but my support is I listen to you vent, whatever it
Yeah.
is. But I think that just being curious with people can be such a big cure for people's distress. And so sometimes as the friend, we shy away actually from curiosity. It's really
Mm.
interesting. We jump right into, oh my gosh, it's going to all be okay. Like, I promise. And After 6 months, like it gets easier. You're going to go back to yourself. Da, 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 da. It's so easy to jump into that. It's also so easy to jump into just like, yeah, I don't know. Like that's what happens when you have a baby. You just don't get to go. It's just how it is. It sucks. But sometimes actually asking for their perspective on the problem and letting them talk about it can be huge. So just,
Yeah.
you're you're telling me you haven't been able, you're upset because you're not getting time to yourself. Like, what do you wish time to yourself looked like? Or like, oh my gosh, I've always been curious. Like, who have you always wanted to be as a mom? Really asking those questions you would ask when you were 13 at a sleepover party. We used to ask lots of questions to each
Yeah.
other. Who do you want to date? Why? When you grow up, what do you think you're going to be like? And I think when we become moms or adults, even, we don't really ask great questions anymore, but people like to still
Yeah.
talk about it. So being curious.
So good. Now, let's apply that into our partner relationships
Yeah.
and our marriages or committed relationships. Now, I hear this phrase a lot. Well, that person's not the same person I married. And my husband and I joke about this, honestly, because when we started dating, I was really young. I was 19. I was
Oh my
working three
gosh.
jobs in college. Like, I am definitely not the same person when we started dating, and in so many good ways, right? And I think that we are supposed to evolve and grow. So, as we close out our conversation, I want to talk a little bit about we the women that listen to this podcast, the women in our community, they're aspiring to be a higher level version of themselves in one way or the other. Some
Hmm.
days that's taking a shower today. Some days
Hmm.
that's going after your dream career business or that like really cool Pinterest snack that you saw or whatever it is. Whatever
Hmm.
it is that you're looking to achieve. But when we're doing that, we're changing who we are. We're finding a higher level version of ourselves and evolving. So, in committed relationships and partnerships, how do we nurture this desire to evolve and become a new version of ourselves, but also understand that that person kind of has to grow with us or accept this growing version of us? What is the dynamic to make that work when you know you want to change and you want to evolve?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important mindsets when people get into relationships is going into it with a growth mindset. The purpose of partnership is to support each other in navigating life, and navigating challenges and growing into more mature adults. Whether you get married when you're 19 or you're 50 or whatever it is,
Yeah.
really you're entering into something saying when the hot, passionate honeymoon phase is over, my role here with you is to help you meet the goals that you have in life and to live a life that feels fulfilling and valuable to you. And your role is to help me do that. And some of that is in the daily nitty gritty of like, we're going to help each other navigate these kids, or we're going to help each other pay these bills. And some of that is in a much more kind of awe-inspiring way where it's like I have these hopes and dreams that I'm going to have a partnership that like is very very healing for me, or I have a partnership where we have a lot of fun and we meet goals and we change the world together, or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
either way, that's the whole point. And so when you notice your partner growing, something you should be proud of yourself for is that somehow the relationship and the family life is actually allowing that person to grow. Now, does it change if you're growing? Are you just leaving people behind in the dust? That's something really important to pay attention to, because you can grow, you can be meeting your goals and all of those types of things, but you also have to be able to still stay relational. Remember, I talked earlier,
Yeah.
being in a relationship means I see me, I see you. And so, when I get opportunities with my career, I'm still checking in with my husband, like, hey, I have all these things I have to do in these upcoming months, but like, how's that affecting you? And I have space to hear that instead of immediately getting defensive and being like, you're blocking my growth. Why don't you want me to do that? I'm able to be like, yeah, I get it. When we got married, I'm making this up because this isn't really true, but I could see somebody being like, when we got married, you weren't flying away all the time, and I thought you were going to be
Mhm.
here. And I could be like, yeah, I get that. Like, when we got married, I wasn't traveling a lot for work, and that's not what you signed up for. Is there anything we can do together so that you feel comfortable with this? Because I might be blocking his growth, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you need so that you feel like you're being propped up and supported and you're getting to grow? And how do we do that together? Now, sometimes growth can bring out a lot of uncomfortable feelings for the other person, and they might try to shut you down and, say, oh, that's stupid. Why do you want to open that business? I don't even know why you'd want to do that. You weren't a business person when we met. And you need to also be able to have limits with even your partner, right? That's not cool. You're not allowed to shut down my ideas. That's really hurtful. Um, the hope is that as you grow, you're feeling proud of each other, and you're feeling proud that you can offer support to someone as they grow. Now, sometimes people do grow apart, and they might say, I didn't sign up to marry someone who's away every single week for work. Is that going to change? And the other person might say, no, I'm going to be away from work, and I don't know if we're going to be able to work this out. Sometimes that means you have to think about what you're going to do about that. But growth is an amazing aspect of being in a relationship, that you get to watch someone through a lot of
Yeah.
iterations of themselves.
I love that. Okay, before I ask my last final two questions, where can everyone connect you? Find all of your greatness. I love your social media. You put so much good, tangible tactics and advice on there, so I highly recommend everyone follows you there. But where would you like to send everyone?
So the easiest place to find me is on my website, which is just my name, so ElizabethEarnshaw.com, and that links you to my book and my social media and all of those types of things. But you can also go to my Instagram account, which is at Liz Listens, and connect with me there as well.
Amazing. And on that last topic and talking about your book, we're talking about we want this to work. We want people to grow. And that's the
Yes.
title of your book. And I think we all get into a relationship, a committed partnership with the goal of support and with the goal of wanting it to work. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about what is unpacked in your book and who the right person is that it's for. And I think that it is so important, coming back to our very first question of we want to do these things before there's even a problem, right? So having these skills and having these things to make it work before there's a problem is really, really important. And I know you talk a little bit about like premarital advice and like premarital support, but for those that are already there, you want to start now. You don't need to you don't need to say, well, we missed that boat, so we're just not
Yeah.
going to do that. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the book and a little bit about like taking action now regardless of what season you're in.
Yeah, so the book is called I Want This to Work. And obviously, ideally, we'd work on things before they got bad. But reality tells us no, we work on things once we start to feel a certain pain point. So my advice is work on it as soon as you start to feel the pain point. Don't wait 6 years. But the book, I wrote it because I had been recommending so many different books to couples, and each book would have a little piece of the different things that we need. So
Yeah.
people would have to read like a whole book on attachment styles, or a whole book on communication, or a whole book on emotional regulation. And they weren't getting it all in one concise spot. And so the book really highlights all of the different types of things that couples might go through, and how can you navigate those with some tangible skills. So you're arguing and you're using all those four horsemen. What are some things you can actually do to replace the four horsemen and improve your communication? You are operating from a place of shame, and so you're kind of self-sacrificing yourself, and because of that, you're not getting what you need in a relationship. So what are some things you can actually do to start setting boundaries and advocating for yourself and kind of showing up as you again? You get into huge blowout arguments. That's great. That you shouldn't say horrible things to each other, but in reality you do. So in the book we talk about, like, what do you actually do? How do you soothe yourself and come back from those conversations so that you can repair things instead of having them get worse? So the entire book is really a handbook for how do you navigate life with your partner.
Absolutely love it. And we can get that anywhere that we buy books, including Amazon, everything else. So we'll link that below. Um, what is something that you're really excited about in this season? A goal that you're working towards? You're 6 month postpartum with your second little baby. You have so many things that are flowing and going on. What is something that's lighting you up and really getting you in your goals right now?
Yeah. So when I talked about those three choices earlier, my husband and I have been making very abrasive choices lately.
It's that
And
season.
The season, we went through a season of doing it all and taking it all on and following the path that people are supposed to follow. And it was very stressful. And so, something I have been doing over the past several months is like way less and
Yeah.
getting comfortable being okay with that. It's kind of funny because it's going a little opposite to that, but I just finished my next book, which is called Till Stress Do Us Part. And the entire book is about how stressed out we all are and how it's causing a lot of people to be unhappy in their relationships. And
Yeah.
I needed to take my own advice that, it's on all of us to reduce our own stress. And so I've had to say goodbye to a lot of things. Like I don't really use my social media that much anymore. Um, I'm not everything to everybody. There's a lot of things I'm invited to do, and I say no because I want to sit on the couch and cuddle my baby. I
Yeah.
want to sleep in sometimes. I want to have nothing to do on a weekend. And right now, what that means is that like my career is probably going to take a little bit of a break and it feels really good. And so
Yeah.
I'm really excited for that this year. And next year, I'll probably be all over the place again, but that's this season.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to understand like what that means for you, right? Because your career taking a break is different than someone else's career taking a break, right?
Yeah.
Because you've built this foundation that's going to continue to flow without
Yeah.
you doing anything, right?
I'm
And
very
that's what I
lucky.
mean. Like your social media has so much already there for people to get into, even if you're not as active now. And what
Yes,
is less active for you is still active than compared to different things, right?
for sure. I
And
still own a business and
yeah,
have 40 employees and all sorts of things.
yeah, and so but I think that's really important for moms to see and understand. And I love that you're using yourself as an example. Is like you get to decide what that means for you, right? And
Yeah.
so taking a break to you means this, and taking a break to someone else means something else, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. So I'm excited for you to take your version of your break post
Thank
book
you.
two and get that all done. And when can we expect that book to be released?
This fall, actually. So
That's so
it'll
exciting.
be ready, I think, by November. It's done. They just have to do all the
Yeah.
editing and all of that, and it'll be out. So I'm really excited for it to be out in the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, as we wrap up here, I love to, we have had such good conversation, so many things, but we also know the mental overload of motherhood. I don't want anyone to get off this podcast and not make changes. So, for those that heard all these good things, but are need like a quick win, they need to take action immediately today. It's going to be super specific to what their dynamic is in their house, right?
Yeah.
But I want to say, let's pull it back and say, if they're not feeling 100% happy in their relationship with either their children or their partner, what is one thing that they could do themselves without bringing either of those other people involved? What is
Yeah.
one thing they could do themselves today that would benefit those relationships?
One thing that I think would be really important is figuring out how you can, at least towards yourself, articulate what is making you so unhappy and then describe to yourself before you try to describe to anybody else what you'd actually need in what's called positive terms. So we often describe what we need in negative terms, which is like I don't want the house to be a mess anymore. I don't want to be the only one cleaning the house. I don't want to have no sex life, whatever it is. But instead, with sitting with yourself and saying, this is what I'm noticing. This is a template you can use. I notice X. So you're noticing, I notice that we don't have sex anymore. I notice that the kids don't listen to me. I notice the house is a wreck. And I'm feeling, so talking about what you're feeling, feelings are not thoughts. Sometimes we say, I'm feeling like nobody cares about me. Just a feelings word. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Pull up the feelings chart. These things make me think. Then write down your thoughts. It makes me think I'm not valued in this house. It makes me think I'm never going to have an opportunity to focus on my career. It makes me think that I'm never going to get a chance to rest. And what I need is, and then talk about what you really need. Write it down. What I need is more help. What I need is a break. What I need is more compassion for my family members. Whatever it is, talk about what you actually do want, not what you don't want, what you do need. Um, and get clear with that on your own. And then
Yeah.
you can try to go and share that with people. But once you know what it is, then you can start to set limits and boundaries. If what you know is I need more time, That might look like at nighttime when you want to play. I work with a lot of moms and we talk a lot about just being like the hyperactive mom where you're like, sure, I'll play another game. And yes, like we'll do this together and we can keep talking. And I'm not going to go, I can't even get the bills paid because you yell at me when I'm on my computer or whatever it is. But really being able to say then, now that you know what you want, you can say to people, mommy needs more time each day. So I am going to be taking 45 minutes. And you can go and take
Mm,
that 45 minutes knowing that's what you need in order to feel better.
so good. Okay, so I am noticing blank.
I notice.
I notice, I feel,
Mhm,
I'm thinking, I
mhm.
need,
Yep.
right? Those are the four. Okay.
Yep.
So good. Liz, thank you so much. This is such a good conversation. I can't wait to have you back and just unpack your new book, and we could talk about all these things and so much more. So thank you. Thank you for
Thanks
being
for
here.
having me.